Baker Mayfield's football career took off with a meteoric rise to superstardom, but after pulling off the impossible, in the blink of an eye, he's hit rock bottom. At the age of just 27, his career has already involved more ups and downs than your favorite roller coaster ride. Mayfield's ride started from the day he was born, when a football was essentially placed in his hand. Growing up in Austin, Texas, with a dad who played college football at the University of Houston, football for Mayfield has always been way more than just a game. It was more like a religion. He also had a brother who was 5 years older than him, but Baker paid no attention to that age gap. It didn't matter what activity the two were doing. He desperately wanted to beat his older bro. This win-at-all-costs mentality shined through the most whenever he played sports. At Lake Travis High School, Mayfield played baseball and football, but heading into his junior season, he still wasn't the starting quarterback. At the point where most top prospects had their mailboxes overflowing with college recruiting letters, Mayfield needed the starter to get injured in the season opener to finally become QB1. But once he got his chance, Mayfield never looked back. Over the next 2 seasons, he led his team to a 25-2 record and a state championship. Mayfield finished his high school career with 6,255 passing yards, 67 touchdowns, and only 8 interceptions. Despite these nearly perfect stats and winning a state title, which in Texas will get you free meals in your hometown for the rest of your life, he never became a big-time college recruit. Maybe it was because of his underwhelming physical stature, but Mayfield didn't receive a single scholarship offer from a major program. Rated as a 3-star recruit, he had scholarship offers from schools like Florida Atlantic, New Mexico, Rice, and Wyoming. Meanwhile, places like Baylor and Texas Tech only gave him preferred walk-on offers. This lack of belief from major programs was a tough pill for Mayfield to swallow. He could have just gone to one of the smaller schools on scholarship and potentially immediately been the starter there, but Mayfield had much grander plans. He said, "I easily could have gone to a place like Florida Atlantic, but my dad pushed me to realize that my dream was to play somewhere big." Mayfield decided to bet on himself and walk on at Texas Tech. Life as a walk-on is supposed to be far from glamorous. At Power 5 schools, they almost always begin their careers on the bench. In fact, during their freshman seasons, they're lucky to even see the field at all. But somebody must have forgotten to tell Texas Tech or Mayfield this. Ahead of his freshman year, following an injury to the Red Raiders starter, Mayfield shocked everyone by doing something previously never done before at that level in the history of the sport. He became the first walk-on true freshman quarterback to start a Division I season opener. That year, Mayfield started 8 games and threw for 2,315 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. It was a solid enough showing to bring home the Big 12 Conference Freshman Offensive Player of the Year award. But on the same day Mayfield learned that he had won the award, he received other news that forever changed his life path. It turned out that despite his performance, he was still not receiving a scholarship the following spring. Mayfield felt deeply disrespected and had lost all trust in the Red Raider coaching staff moving forward. So it was time for him to bet on himself one more time. He announced that he would be leaving Texas Tech.
They didn't recruit me. Grew up 15 miles from their campus. I can't stand them.
And in January of his freshman year, Mayfield and his mom drove to the University of Oklahoma to do something unthinkable. They enrolled him in classes at Oklahoma without saying a word to anyone on the Sooners football coaching staff. It wasn't until a month later that the head coach confirmed Mayfield would be joining the team.
And he introduces himself. I said, "So you're Baker Mayfield?" I had no idea.
But due to the Big 12's interconference transfer rules and an unsuccessful appeal of the restrictions, he was forced to sit out the entire upcoming season. After leading Oklahoma scout team for a year, Mayfield was finally eligible to suit up for real game action. After earning himself the starting spot, Mayfield over the next 2 seasons was a man on a mission, determined to prove to everyone that he belonged. He threw for a combined 11,365 yards and 76 touchdowns with just 15 interceptions. As both years, he was a finalist for college football's most prestigious honor, the Heisman Trophy. But being a finalist is never good enough for Mayfield, no matter how much of an honor it may be. So his senior season was his final chance to win the award. Mayfield looked like he was on a different level than everyone else on the field. That year, he finished second in all of college football in passing yards and touchdowns with 4,627 and 43. Mayfield also led the nation in completion percentage at 70.5 while only throwing for 6 interceptions. His video game-like numbers were more than enough for him to finally bring home the Heisman.
This year's Heisman Trophy winner is Baker Mayfield of the University of Oklahoma.
Mayfield did so in almost historic fashion, receiving 86% of the possible points, which was the 3rd highest in the award's long storied history, and he became the first ever walk-on player to win it. Ahead of the 2018 NFL Draft, Mayfield was viewed as one of the top, if not the top, prospects. He had just gone on a 3-year rampage of absolutely shredding defenses with extreme precision. By the time draft night rolled around, it had become clear that the Cleveland Browns were taking him with the first overall pick. Though Mayfield's production in college completely warranted the selection, he was never supposed to be the number 1 pick.
From my perspective, he was the number 4 overall quarterback, right?
Here's a guy who wasn't the starter going into his junior year of high school, never got any scholarship offers from major college programs, and had to walk on at 2 different schools. With a background like that, just getting drafted at all would be an amazing accomplishment. And yet, he now had the weight of an entire city on his supposedly undersized shoulders, as they expected him to turn around their tortured franchise. Browns fans were starving for a winning football team. By week 3 of the 2018 season, the Browns' winless streak sat at 19 games, as Mayfield could only watch, serving as the team's backup. But during that week 3 game, with Cleveland trailing the Jets 14-0 and seemingly well on their way to extending their streak to 20, Browns starting QB Tyrod Taylor went down with an injury. When Mayfield came in to take his first career NFL snap, there was a sense of hope and excitement that Cleveland hadn't felt in years. He was someone who had been doubted countless times, but never stopped fighting. The similarities between him and the name on the front of his jersey were striking. So when Mayfield became the first player in NFL history since 1961 to come off the bench in his debut and throw for more than 200 yards and lead his team to its first win of the season, Cleveland couldn't contain its love for Baker. Number 6 jerseys flew off the shelves and filled the stadium for every remaining Browns home game. He led Cleveland to a 6-7 record the rest of the way. While finishing below 500 may not seem impressive, the Browns had managed to win more than 5 games only once in the previous 10 seasons, and that was a year in which they finished just 7-9. In addition to actually winning games, Mayfield was balling out on the stat sheet. As a rookie appearing in 14 games, he threw for 3,725 yards and 27 touchdowns, which broke Peyton Manning and Russell Wilson's previously shared record for most as a rookie. After about as perfect of a rookie campaign as the Browns or Mayfield could have asked for, year 2 expectations for him were sky high, especially considering that during the offseason, Cleveland went out and got Mayfield a new lethal weapon in Odell Beckham Jr. Heading into 2019, the Browns and Mayfield were seen as the league's darlings. On paper, they had the makings of a potential Super Bowl contender, which hadn't been said about a Browns team in decades.
Will Baker lead the Browns to a Super Bowl in his career?
I think so, yes.
But football isn't decided on paper. It's decided on the field, and that's where the Browns and Mayfield failed to meet expectations. Cleveland finished the year 6-10, as Mayfield took a step back in his development, throwing for nearly as many interceptions as touchdowns. Although very disappointing, the Browns chalked these struggles up to poor coaching, so they fired first-year head coach Freddie Kitchens.
Freddie Kitchens has been fired as the head coach of the Browns, according to our Adam Schefter and Chris Mortensen. The Browns finished 6-10.
After hiring the Vikings offensive coordinator Kevin Stefanski to be their new head coach, Cleveland was cautiously optimistic that he could help Mayfield turn things around again. The duo went out and led Cleveland to an 11-5 record and their first postseason appearance since 2002. Mayfield threw for 3,563 yards and 26 touchdowns, while getting his turnover problem under control by throwing only 8 interceptions. In the wild card round, the task of facing the team's arch rival, the Steelers, on the road got that much tougher, as Stefanski was forced to miss the game due to COVID. Without his head coach and play caller, Mayfield was forced to step up in the franchise's biggest game in nearly 2 decades. He threw for 264 yards and 3 touchdowns in the Browns' first playoff win since the 1994 season.
They will beat the Steelers in the opening round of the playoffs.
Although they fell in the next round in a devastating 22-17 loss, leading the Browns to a playoff win had Cleveland putting Mayfield on a pedestal that only LeBron James had been put on in recent years. So when the 2021 season arrived, the city once again was having dreams of making the Super Bowl. But the Browns and Mayfield got off to a nightmare start. In week 2, he suffered a partially torn labrum that he continued to play with until re-aggravating it in week 6. Mayfield missed the Browns' next game, which was his first missed game since he took over as the starter. Along with battling injury, Mayfield had a new fight on his hands, one that involved his star wide receiver's dad. With OBJ having gotten off to the worst start in his NFL career, his dad, Odell Beckham Sr., ripped Mayfield with an Instagram post. Shared just hours before the league's trade deadline, the post featured an 11-minute video meant to highlight Mayfield's poor throws and decision-making.
I do not condone his father chiming in on social media the way that he did. Odell Beckham Jr., That's you, bro.
It was unheard of for this to happen at the NFL level, but also shows just how polarizing Mayfield has been. Ultimately, the Beckhams got their wish as the Browns traded OBJ to the Rams. With him now gone, Mayfield was determined to show he wasn't the issue. But in Week 10, he suffered a right knee contusion that further slowed him down. By Week 17, Cleveland's hopes had been brutally crushed as they were already eliminated from playoff contention. In 14 games played, Mayfield finished with 3,010 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. It was a year that had Browns fans completely divided. One side blamed Mayfield for the team's struggles and wanted to move on from him.
Right now, I don't think he's the right guy for us.
While the other wanted to give him another chance and thought injuries affected his play.
I love Baker a lot. He's hurt right now.
This past offseason, while Browns fans went back and forth with each other, the team reached its own conclusion. It was time to make a change. Cleveland traded for Deshaun Watson and signed him to a historic contract extension. It was the team's way of saying they no longer believed in Baker. Just like in college, Mayfield felt disrespected and wanted out.
I feel disrespected, 100%. Because I was told one thing and they completely did another.
So he requested a trade. After struggling to find someone willing to take on his contract, the Browns traded him to the Panthers for a conditional 5th-round pick. And after having been given up on and thrown into a quarterback battle in a new place, Mayfield felt right at home. In college, he had been in this exact position, and this was the type of environment he had thrived in. Just like back then, he went out and won the starting job. He was dead set on proving the Browns wrong and showing the world that he was a solution, not the problem. Except this time, there was no fairy tale ending. In 6 games starting for the Panthers, Mayfield finished with a 1-5 record, while completing under 60% of his passes and throwing for 6 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. The average quarterback rating is 50. Mayfield's was 18.6, a league low. Having already been benched, Carolina decided that still wasn't enough. On the Monday following their Week 13 game, the Panthers released Baker.
Following that breaking news in the NFL, where the Panthers are cutting ties with quarterback Baker Mayfield.
He had officially gone from being the face of a franchise to so undesired that a team got rid of him mid-season for nothing in return, while only being a game and a half out of the playoffs. For them to no longer want him on the roster or even in the facility in the middle of the playoff hunt speaks volumes for how far Mayfield has fallen. But because he has reached rock bottom so quickly, he has been given one more chance, as the Rams claimed him the day after his release from the Panthers. Only time will tell whether Baker Mayfield can revive his once promising career. And with a story as dramatic as his, Hollywood is the perfect place for the next and potentially final chapter to be written.